God will remove the wrong people from your life. What if the very person you're fighting to keep is the one God is trying to remove? Could your unanswered prayers and emotional pain be signs of divine protection, not rejection? Sometimes, God ends relationships not to break your heart, but to save your future. Will you trust Him through the letting go? God's plan for your life is not random, accidental, or without direction. Before you took your first breath, He knew every detail. The victories you would celebrate, the challenges you would face, and the people who would come and go along the way. Yet, when people leave us, it often feels like something went wrong. The truth is, sometimes God removes individuals not to punish us, but to protect and prepare us. When relationships end, it's easy to focus on the pain, but God sees what we cannot. He knows the intentions of hearts, the unseen consequences, and the destiny He has planned. If you've been wondering why certain people walked away, or why connections fell apart unexpectedly, this message is for you. It's time to see endings as divine beginnings. God has a plan for every life before you were even formed in your mother's womb. He knew you, He saw the path ahead, the trials you would face, the victories you would win, and the purpose for which you were created. You were not here by accident. The world may tell you that life is random, that you are just a product of chance. But the Word of God says differently. It declares that you were fearfully and wonderful made, designed by the Creator Himself with a divine purpose. Sometimes it is difficult to see God's plan in the middle of life struggles. You may be facing challenges right now that make you question whether God is really leading you. There may be confusion, loss, or disappointment that causes you to wonder if you are walking the right path. But Scripture reminds us that God's ways are higher than our ways, and His thoughts higher than our thoughts. What we see in the present moment is only a small glimpse of the full picture God is painting. God's plan is not always revealed all at once. He unfolds it step by step, teaching us to walk by faith and not by sight. When He called Abraham, He didn't give him a full road map of where he was going. He simply told him to go, to trust, to walk in faith, and that He would show him the land. Abraham obeyed, not knowing where he was headed, but believing that God's promise was sure. In the same way, God is calling you to trust Him even when the path ahead is unclear. There are times when God's plan requires separation. He may remove people from your life not as a punishment, but as a preparation for what He is bringing. Not everyone is meant to go where God is taking you. Some relationships may have been good for a season, but God knows when that season has ended. He removes distractions, unhealthy influences, and those who would hinder your spiritual growth. This is why trusting His plan requires obedience. It means surrendering your desires, your friendships, your ambitions, and even your comfort for the sake of what He has prepared for you. Many struggle with the idea of surrender because they fear what they do not understand. But God's plan is not one of destruction. It is one of hope and a future. Jeremiah 29:11 declares, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." What a promise! Even when life seems uncertain, God is working behind the scenes, aligning the right opportunities, opening doors that no man can shut, and leading you toward the destiny He has prepared. Sometimes we resist His plan because we have our own idea of how life should unfold. We set expectations, timelines, and goals, and when things don't happen according to our schedule, we grow frustrated. But the Bible tells us to trust in the Lord with all our heart and lean not on our own understanding. God's timing is perfect, even when it doesn't align with our own. What may seem like a delay is often divine protection. What may feel like rejection is often redirection. God knows what is best for you, and He is always working for your good. Walking in God's plan requires faith. It means believing that He is guiding you even when you don't see the full picture. It means trusting that He is making a way even when the road ahead looks uncertain. And it means resting in the truth that He will never leave you nor forsake you. When you surrender your plans to God, you are not losing control. You are placing your life in the hands of the one who controls everything. Life is a journey filled with seasons, and in each season, different people come and go. Some relationships last a lifetime, while others are only meant to be part of your story for a short while. It can be difficult to accept when people leave, especially when we have formed deep connections. But one of the most important lessons we must learn is that not everyone who starts with us is meant to finish with us. Are times when God will remove certain individuals from your life, not because they are bad people, but because their purpose in your journey has been fulfilled. This can be painful, especially when you do not understand why. You may ask, why did this person walk away? Why did this friendship fall apart? Why did this relationship end? But the truth is, God sees what we cannot see. He knows the hearts of people. He knows the direction your life is meant to take. And sometimes He will separate you from others in order to take you to the place He has prepared for you. Look at the story of Abraham and Lot. They started their journey together, but there came a point when they had to part ways. They had different callings, different assignments, and God's plan for Abraham required separation. Had Abraham tried to hold on to Lot, he may have delayed the blessings God had in store for him. In the same way, when God calls you to a new level, not everyone will be able to go with you. Some people are only assigned to a certain stage of your life, and when that stage is complete, you must be willing to move forward. Without them, holding on to the wrong people can hinder your growth. When you try to force relationships that God has already released you from, you risk delaying your purpose. Sometimes we hold on out of fear of loneliness, fear of change, fear of stepping into the unknown. But faith requires trust that God knows what He's doing. Trust that if He has allowed someone to leave, He has a reason for it. And trust that He will bring the right people into your life at the right time. Some people leave because they were never meant to stay. Others leave because they were only sent to teach you something for a season. Still others leave because God is protecting you from something you cannot yet see. Whatever the reason, you must not allow the loss of one person to make you doubt God's plan. You must not hold on so tightly to relationships that you miss the new opportunities, the new connections, and the new blessings that God is bringing. When Jesus walked the earth, even He experienced people walking away. Many followed Him for a time, but when the journey became difficult, they turned back. Even some of His closest disciples struggled to stay, yet Jesus never chased after those who left. He remained focused on His mission, knowing that God's will was greater than any temporary loss. In the same way, you must not allow the departure of people to distract you from your purpose. Seasons change, friendships change, relationships change, but God remains the same. He is the one constant in your life, the one who will never leave nor forsake you. And as you continue to walk in His will, you will come to realize that every person who left, every relationship that ended, and every door that closed was part of a greater plan. Even in the moments of God is still in control. There are moments in life when people leave, relationships end, and doors close unexpectedly. When this happens, it can be painful and confusing. You may wonder why things didn't work out, why a close friendship suddenly faded, or why someone you trusted walked away. It is in these moments of loss that we must remember a powerful truth. When God removes someone from your life, He is not trying to hurt you. He is protecting you. God sees beyond what we can see. He knows the thoughts and intentions of every heart. While you may see someone's outward kindness, God sees their hidden motives. While you may believe that a person belongs in your future, God knows that they may become a stumbling block down the road. This is why He sometimes removes people even when we do not understand what feels like rejection is. Often divine protection, what seems like a painful loss, is in reality a shield against something far greater. Throughout the Bible, we see how God removes people for the sake of His greater plan. When Saul was rejected, as King Samuel mourned for him, he couldn't understand why God had taken away someone he once anointed, but God spoke to Samuel, asking him how long he would grieve over what he had rejected. Sometimes we are like Samuel, holding on to what God has already removed, mourning what God has already released us from. But what we fail to realize is that when God removes something, it is because He has something better in store. There are times when relationships seem perfect on the surface, but God knows what lies ahead. You may believe that a friend or partner is meant to walk with you forever, but God sees if they will turn against you in the future. He knows if their presence will hinder your calling. He understands if they will distract you from your purpose. And so in His mercy, He steps in and removes them, not to break your heart, but to save it from something far worse. One of the most challenging things about God's protection is that it doesn't always look like protection in the moment. Sometimes it looks like heartbreak. It looks like disappointment. It looks like unanswered prayers. You may have begged God to let a relationship work, to restore a broken friendship, or to open a door that's suddenly shut. But what if God was sparing you? What if He was closing that door to prevent future pain? What if He was ending something before He could destroy you? When God removes people, we often ask why, but the real question should be, Lord, what are you protecting me from? Instead of fighting to hold on, we must learn to trust that His ways are higher than our ways. He is the good shepherd who leads us beside still waters and away from danger. He knows where the road leads, and if He is blocking a path, it is because He sees what is waiting on the other side. Even Jesus in His earthly ministry experienced betrayal and separation. Not everyone who walked with Him stayed. Judas was close to Jesus, but his heart was not right. Had Jesus tried to keep Judas from leaving, he would have been standing in the way of God's will. But he understood that sometimes people must go so that God's purpose can be fulfilled. In the same way, when people walk away from your life, do not chase after them. Do not fight to keep what God is removing. Instead, trust that He knows what He is doing. God's protection is often wrapped in the disguise of loss. What you thought you needed may have been the very thing keeping you from your destiny. What you thought was good for you may have been a hidden trap. Trusting God means believing that every removal is for your good, even when you don't understand, even when it hurts, even when you feel alone. Know that He is working behind the scenes. He is shielding you, guiding you, and preparing you for something greater. Letting go is one of the hardest things we will ever have to do in life. Whether it's a relationship, a friendship, a job, a dream, or even a season of life, releasing what we once held dear is never easy. The human heart longs for stability, for familiarity, for the comfort of what is known, and yet time and time again God calls us to step out in faith, to release the things we are clinging to, and to trust that He knows what is best for us. Faith is not just about believing in God when things are going well. Faith is about trusting Him when He asks you to let go of something you never thought you would have to release. It is about believing that His plans are greater than yours, even when you do not understand. It is about surrendering your desire, your expectations, and your attachments, knowing that He sees the full picture while you only see a small piece. One of the greatest examples of letting go in faith is found in the story of Abraham. God promised Abraham that he would be the father of many nations, and in his old age that promise came to life through his son Isaac. But then came a moment that tested Abraham's faith like never before. God asked him to take Isaac to the mountain and offer him as a sacrifice. Imagine the weight of that request. After waiting so long for the promise, after finally receiving the blessing, God was now asking him to lay it down. It must have made no sense to Abraham. But despite his questions, despite the pain, he obeyed. He let go in faith. And at the very last moment, God provided a ram in the thicket, proving that he never intended to take Isaac away. He was simply testing Abraham's trust. Sometimes God will ask you to let go of something not because he wants to take it from you permanently, but because he wants to see if you trust him enough to surrender it. Other times he asks you to release something because he has something better ahead. But the test remains the same. Will you hold on out of fear, or will you trust him enough to open your hands and let go? Letting go requires faith because it forces us to step into the unknown. It requires us to walk away from what is comfortable and familiar, even when we do not yet see what God has in store. Peter experienced this firsthand when Jesus called him to step out of the boat and walk on water. As long as Peter kept his eyes on Jesus, he was able to do the impossible. But the moment he focused on the wind and the waves, he began to sink. That is what happens when we try to hold on to what God is asking us to release. The fear of the unknown becomes greater than our faith in the one who is leading us. Many times we hold on to things out of fear of being alone, fear of failing, fear that if we let go, we may never receive something better. But God has not given us a spirit of fear. He has given us a spirit of power of love, and of a sound mind. When he calls you to release something, he is not leading you into destruction. He is leading you into your purpose. He is making room for something greater, something beyond what you could ask or imagine. So letting go does not mean you have failed. It does not mean you are losing. It means you are surrendering to God's will, trusting that his PL are higher than yours. It means you are choosing faith over fear, obedience over comfort, and trust over control. It is in the release that God moves. It is in the surrender that his power is revealed. It is in the act of letting go that you position yourself to receive the fullness of what he has prepared for you. Obedience to God is the key that unlocks his blessings in our live lives. From the very beginning, God has called his people to follow his voice, to walk in his ways, and to trust his commands. Time and time again, scripture shows that when people choose obedience, they receive God's favor, his provision, and his protection. But when they walk in disobedience, they experience struggle, delay, and unnecessary hardship. Obedience is not about following rules for the sake of religion. It is about aligning your life with God's perfect will so that you can walk in the fullness of his plan. God's blessings are tied to our willingness to trust him. He has given us his word filled with instructions on how to live, how to love, and how to honor him. But too often people pick and choose which commands they want to follow, treating obedience as an option rather than a necessity. The truth is, partial obedience is still disobedience. When God speaks, he expects us to respond in faith, not hesitation, even when we do not understand, even when his instructions seem difficult. Obedience is always the path to greater blessings. One of the clearest examples of obedience leading to blessing is found in the life of Abraham. When God called him to leave his home and go to a land he had never seen, Abraham could have refused. He could have stayed in his comfort zone, afraid of the unknown, but he obeyed, and because of his faith, God made him the father of many nations. The blessings that followed Abraham's obedience were beyond anything he could have imagined. His willingness to trust God, even without knowing the full plan, set him on a path of divine favor. Obedience is not always easy. Sometimes it requires sacrifice. It may mean letting go of relationships, walking away from opportunities, or making choices that the world does not understand, but every time you obey, you position yourself for God's best. Look at the story of Peter. When Jesus told him to cast his net into the water, Peter had already been fishing all night. Without success in his human reasoning, there was no point in trying again. But he obeyed the Lord's instruction, and his nets came back overflowing with fish. The miracle was released because of his obedience. Many times people pray for blessings, but do not realize that blessings follow obedience. They ask God for increase, but are unwilling to be faithful with what they already have. They ask for open doors, but refuse to walk through the ones He has already provided. They pray for breakthroughs, but hesitate when God asks them to take a step of faith. God honors those who trust Him completely. He is looking for people who will follow His voice even when it does not make sense. Disobedience, on the other hand, leads to consequences. When Adam and Eve chose to disobey God, they lost the paradise He had given them. When Jonah ran from his calling, he found himself in the belly of a great fish. When the Israelites refused to trust God in the wilderness, they wandered for 40 years instead of entering the promised land. Delayed obedience is still disobedience, and every act of disobedience comes with a cost. But the good news is that God is merciful. Even when we have failed in obedience, He gives us opportunities to turn back. He is not looking for perfection, He is looking for a willing heart. He blesses those who seek Him, who follow Him, and who surrender their own ways in exchange for His. When you choose to obey, even in the small things, you are setting yourself up for His favor. You are aligning your life with His purpose. You are walking in the path that leads to His greatest blessings. Growth is a process, and spiritual growth is no different. It does not happen by accident, nor does it come without effort, discipline, and refining. Just as a tree must be pruned to bear more fruit, so must we be pruned in our spiritual journey. Pruning is the process of removing what is unnecessary. God is the Master Gardener, knows exactly what needs to be removed from our lives so that we can grow stronger in Him. Jesus spoke about pruning in John 15:02, saying, "Every branch that bears fruit He prunes so that it will bear more fruit." This means that even when we are growing, even when we are walking in the right direction, God will still prune us. He will cut away distractions, unhealthy attachments, and areas of our lives that hinder our spiritual development. Pruning is not punishment, it is preparation. It is the way God shapes us, molds us, and makes us more like Him. One of the most challenging aspects of pruning is that it often involves loss. God may remove people from your life who are not aligned with your purpose. He may close doors that you desperately wanted to walk through. He may strip away habits, desires, and comforts that you relied on. In the moment, it may feel like you are losing, but in reality, you are being positioned for something greater. A tree does not resist the pruning process, it surrenders to the hands of the gardener. Likewise, we must trust that when God removes something, it is because He is making room for something better. Pruning also requires patience. Growth does not happen overnight. When a branch is as cute, it takes time for new fruit to appear. Many people become frustrated when they do not see immediate results. They wonder why they are still facing struggles, why they are still waiting for breakthroughs, why their spiritual growth feels slow. But just because you cannot see growth does not mean it is not happening. God is working beneath the surface, strengthening your roots, deepening your faith, and preparing you for the next season. Sometimes pruning comes in the form of trials. God allows difficulties not to destroy us, but to refine us. The hardships you face are not meant to break you. They are meant to strengthen your character, increase your faith, and teach you to rely on God alone. Just as fire refines gold, trials refine our spirit. They reveal what is truly in our hearts and show us areas where we need to grow. Without challenges, we remain spiritually stagnant, but when we embrace the process, we come out stronger, wiser, and more prepared for what God has in store. One of the greatest examples of spiritual pruning is seen in the life of Joseph. God had great plans for Joseph, but before he could step into his destiny, he had to go through a season of pruning. He was betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, and thrown into prison from the outside. It looked like he was losing everything, but in reality, God was shaping him for the position he would one day hold. Every trial, every loss, and every moment of hardship was part of God's plan to prepare him for greatness. When the time was right, Joseph stepped into his calling, and because he had been refined through the process, he was able to handle the blessings that came with it. Spiritual pruning is not about taking away, it is about making room for more. God wants to remove anything in your life that is holding you back from your full potential. He wants to strip away fear, doubt, pride, and anything that keeps you from growing in faith. Though the process may be painful, the result is always worth it. When you surrender to His pruning, you become stronger, more fruitful, and more aligned with His purpose. Waiting is one of the hardest things in life. It is difficult to be patient when you are longing for an answer, seeking a breakthrough, or expecting a promise to come to pass. In a world that moves fast, where everything is instant and immediate, waiting can feel frustrating, but God does not operate on human schedules. His timing is perfect, even when it does not align with our expectations. Trusting His timing requires faith, surrender, and a deep understanding that He sees the full picture. While we only see a small piece, throughout Scripture we see that God works according to His divine plan. He is never late, never early, but always on time. Abraham and Sarah waited years for the fulfillment of God's promise, a child who would make them the parents of nations, but in their impatience they tried to take matters into their own hands, which led to unnecessary hardship. If they had trusted God's perfect timing, they would have avoided the struggles that came with their impatience. How often do people step ahead of God, trying to force something to happen instead of waiting for His best? Impatience can lead to decisions that bring regret, but trusting God's timing always leads to blessings. God's timing is not just about when something happens, it is also about preparing you for what is to come. Sometimes He delays certain blessings because you are not yet ready to handle them. A blessing given too soon can become a burden. A door opened before its time can lead to failure. God knows what is best, and He knows when you are truly prepared for the next step. What feels like a delay is often God protecting you from stepping into something prematurely. He is developing your character, strengthening your faith, and molding you into the person you need to be before He opens the next door. Trusting God's timing also means surrendering control. It is human nature to want a plan, to predict, and to understand everything, but faith is not about having all the answers. It is about trusting the one who does. When Jesus was on earth, He never rushed. He moved according to God's perfect plan, never ahead and never behind. Even when His friend Lazarus was sick, Jesus did not hurry to heal him. Instead, He waited, and in that waiting, a greater miracle took place. Lazarus was raised from the dead. Had Jesus arrived earlier, people would have only seen a healing, but by waiting, they witnessed resurrection power. Sometimes God's delays are not denials, they are setups for something greater than we imagine. Waiting on God requires patience, but it also requires action. Trusting His timing does not mean doing nothing. It means being faithful where you are while believing that He is working behind the scenes. Joseph, after being sold into slavery and wrongfully imprisoned, did not sit idly waiting for his breakthrough. He remained faithful in every season, serving with excellence even in difficult circumstance, and when the time was right, God elevated him to a position of power and influence. Your waiting season is not wasted. God is using it to prepare you, to strengthen you, and to position you for what is ahead. One of the greatest challenges in trusting God's timing is when it seems like He is blessing others while you are still waiting. It can be tempting to compare your journey to someone else's and wonder why your prayers have not yet been answered. But God's plan for you is unique. Just because someone else is stepping into their season does not mean God has forgotten about you. He is not withholding His blessings, He is aligning them with His perfect will. What He has for you will come at the right time and the right way, and nothing can stop it. Trusting God's timing means resting in the assurance that He is in control. It means believing that even when you do not see progress, He is still working. It means surrendering your plans, your deadlines, and your expectations, knowing that His ways are higher than yours. When the time is right, everything will fall into place, not by your striving, but by His perfect design. God's ways are higher than ours, and His timing, His plans, and His processes are always perfect. Though life may bring seasons of waiting, pruning, letting go, and even hardship, each moment is a part of His divine purpose. Obedience to His will opens the door to blessings, and trusting His timing brings peace beyond understanding. Growth is never without challenges, but God removes, refines, and redirects, not to harm us, but to shape us into who He has called us to be. Every trial, every delay, and every test of faith is preparing you for something greater. When you surrender to His process, trust His wisdom, and walk in obedience, you position yourself for the fullness of His blessings. No matter what you face, God is always working, always faithful, and always leading you toward His perfect plan.